AOC and the border czar. There seem to be going back and forth because now people are saying that AOC needs to be held accountable uh, for what exactly? Okay, because apparently Homan and Cortez seem to have this love-hate relationship with each other. They're furious at each other. So what exactly happened? Well, AOC was informing people about what they should do if they are confronted by ICE. You know, again, being full aware, she hosted a webinar on how to evade ICE. I wouldn't say how to evade ICE, but more of, hey, know your rights, right? But the thing is, folks, the Democrats, you don't have your supermajority. And right now, corporate media is being ripped apart. They're hemorrhaging views, and it's not like how it used to be. Plus, especially in sanctuary cities where Chicago, for example, Mayor Brandon Johnson is failing miserably, not only protecting migrants, but in turn keeping order. So let's talk about the video in question that seemed to have triggered everyone, especially those that are on board with ICE's actions. And hey, folks, another fight to keep us divided.
Principle number one in what you can do is that when one of these things comes to your backyard, you can resist. And what that happens over millions of people is that you generate enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples that have already been working. Let's start with immigration and ICE. When people say, what can we do? In my community, we are a heavily immigrant community. ICE raids deeply affect and disrupt our community. So, number one, if you live in a community with a lot of immigrants, know your rights. That's one tangible thing you can do that I want you to do. And that means know your rights if you are a US citizen as well. Okay? Here's one way that we're going to create some friction in this system. Tom Homan, who's directing a lot of these ICE operations nationally, etc., he went on TV practically crying. This dude was whining his ass off because ICE went into the city of Chicago, and Chicago had prepared for them. Community organizers, activists, and their mayor and local elected officials who were
BS on our local mayor. BS on it because, again, what many of you may not know, but Mayor Brandon Johnson right here agrees to testify at a congressional hearing on sanctuary cities next month. So this article came out in February. So in March, our own mayor, the winning mayor, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is cutting the fat from his administration, which is almost too little too late, is going before Congress. That's right. Mayor Brandon Johnson will testify at a hearing on sanctuary cities next month as federal elected officials investigate the city's immigration policies amid President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Johnson's office announced on Wednesday. Johnson and the mayors of Boston, New York City, and Denver. By the way, New York City is already complying with Donald Trump because for some reason Eric Adams seemed to have changed his tune quite quickly. Were invited to speak at the hearing by U.S. Representative James Comer, a Kentucky Republican and chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, in a letter sent on January 27th. According to the letter, Comer's committee is investigating sanctuary jurisdictions and their impact on public safety and the effectiveness of federal efforts to enforce immigration laws of the United States. Johnson confirmed Wednesday he will go to D.C. to participate in the hearing March 5th, his office said in a statement. So, just so you guys know, we have covered the problems of a lot of these migrant shelters here in Chicago. A lot of people have been calling them out. Even good friend of this show, Jamal Green, who's been on our show, who's talked about the health and safety standards at these facilities, and also for the fact that, again, the city never had a plan to help out many of the migrant communities here. And in turn, a lot of resentment has been growing all over the city. So AOC and her advice, yeah. Was Chicago ready? No, it wasn't.
were solid on this issue. They educated the city on their legal rights. Because what ICE tries to do is that they rely on people not knowing their rights in order to enter buildings, in order to search workplaces, etc. So when you know your rights, you are able to tell them no, and they do walk away. What you can do is protect people around you and also make sure that you are slowing down this system. The slower they operate, the less they can break.
And in turn, there was a response to that. There was a response. This was done on Fox News. Tom Homan had some words.
But Tom, you got AOC out there, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, putting out a webinar, doing a webinar to help illegals avoid, I guess, apprehension, giving tips about how to continue to remain in the country and ultimately game the system.
And I sent an email today to the Deputy Attorney General. At what level is that impediment? Is that impediment? I'm not an attorney. I'm not a prosecutor. Is that impediment? Is that impeding our law enforcement efforts? If so, what are we going to do about it? Is she crossing the line? So I'm working with the Department of Justice and finding out where is that line that they cross. So maybe AOC is going to be in trouble now, but I need the AOG to opine on that. But because there's impediment, it's impediment in my opinion. I'm not a prosecutor, but we need some further guidance on that. But again, if we have to take every federal dollar out of the city, we'll do it. I mean, we're done. This is about public safety. This is about community safety. Knowingly releasing the public safety back in the public is just stupid. You're putting the public at great risk. You're putting our officers at great risk. You're even putting the illegal alien at great risk because anything can happen on arrest on the street. So we just want to make common sense. In sanctuary cities, they want to step aside. Step aside. We're coming. We're going to do it for you. If you don't want to make your community safer, President Trump's going to.
Well, and everyone, blue cities across America, get ready. Tom.
Okay, yes, of course. Fox News. You're more than happy to slobber anything up. Let's talk about overall what this problem is, especially AOC trying to help. All right. So when ICE first did its raids, especially here in Chicago, much to the chagrin of Trump, he's still probably not going to beat Obama's numbers. Okay. Obama's has those high numbers of people being deported. See, the problem that AOC is doing, all right, is that when you start talking about, preventing federal law enforcement from coming into your communities, what she's also not understanding is that the primary list that ICE has been going after is criminals. But Tom Homan has said before that he wants to expand that list. AOC helping in many ways is contributing to Homan getting what he wants from Trump, and that is expanding that list, going after nonviolent migrants, or is it at people who do have papers? And the system does fail. We have seen so many reports in which people who come here correctly are then deported, targeted in the system. And anytime the Democrats try to help, anytime politicians like AOC try to help, it only ends in a complete freaking disaster. It means more people are going to get hurt. It means more people are going to suffer. It's going to cause communities to be divided. And all across Chicago, constantly, throughout this entire month since I've been reading the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times, you have migrants who are afraid to leave their houses. You have people who even are legal citizens afraid to leave. And it's because of these actions in which AOC putting herself front and center, she's instigating further fights and people dumb enough to believing it. As we covered in the first segment, people dumb enough to start fighting each other and going at each other's throats. And of course, Chicago is already a hotbed. Our mayor hasn't done himself any favors, especially towards his policies with migrants, because there are some parts in the city in which many of these shelters are horrible to live in. There are some parts in the city in which migrants want to leave Chicago and go back to their home country. You also some parts in the city in which you have residents going after migrants and in turn causing further and further fights. This city is ill prepared for it. All this talk about knowing your rights, listen, the city and its institutions here in Chicago are completely inept and corrupt, right? It's not that they can't do their job. It's more of they don't know how to do their job. And when you have a mayor that's already letting people go from his administration, I would not put much stock in believing that the city is going to stick its neck out for you. Things are falling apart. because there never was a plan. And you have a mayor here in Chicago, and I'm just only focusing here in Chicago, Denver, New York City, these other sanctuary cities, whatever your mayors are doing, whatever. But here in Chicago, here in this city, there is no guarantee. So AOC trying to give out all this kind of advice doesn't help, especially knowing Chicago's track record of screwing things up. But continuing on, there's one other thing I want to pull up here for everyone to see firsthand, because again, you gotta love everyone that's involved in this story. Everyone giving their 2 cents.
We're done. This is about public safety. This is about community safety. Knowingly releasing a public safety back in the public is just stupid. You're putting the public at great risk. You're putting our officers at great risk. You're even putting the illegal alien at great risk, because anything can happen on arrest on the street. So we just want to make common sense. In sanctuary cities, they want to step aside. Step aside. We're coming. We're going to do it for you. If you don't want to make your community safer, President Trump's going to.
Now, I want to pull this up here again. Just want to add this in here. Continuing on. In its initial letter, the committee also asked the city of Chicago to provide documents and communications regarding the city's sanctuary status. This includes city officials' correspondence with city employees, state and federal officials, and anyone else related to the city's sanctuary status, according to the letter. It is unclear if Johnson agreed to the second request. His office didn't immediately respond to a request for clarification. In a social media post, Comer said the mayors of Boston, New York City, and Denver also agreed to attend. We will press these mayors for answers and examine measures to enforce compliance with federal immigration law. Chicago's Welcome City ordinance bars local police from assisting in federal immigration enforcement. City officials also do not ask people about their immigration status, nor do they deny services based on immigration status, according to city FAQ. Well, let's explain this a little bit further, okay? Right now, with Mayor Brandon Johnson in uncertain waters, with this first attempt, because there was an attempt to recall Mayor Brandon Johnson. All right. You had local residents furious. You have local residents in city halls. And not to mention, shout out to Jimmy Dore for even playing one of our videos in which we covered how local residents, local community members in the city of Chicago confronting Mayor Brandon Johnson at City Hall. There is a boiling rage here. AOC contributing to anything right now has been nothing but a failure. I also want to address just a couple things here because I love the super chats here. Shout out to Ericus, who tipped $5. AOC is right and effective. She disrupt the force to vote and Green Party movements for the sunscreen dementia Democrat movement. Rebel without a brain. And of course, El Rock'n'Rolla. AOC could bring up Trump's Venezuela video about oil sanctions that resulted in 7.9 million Venezuelans at the border, but she won't because they're complicit. As they are, because guess what? Those sanctions and everything else were happening under the Biden-Harris administration. So any attempt of AOC trying to help ends in a disaster. It's like I'm helping. You're trying to pour out the fire, but you're using gasoline instead. AOC's downfall is inevitable as a politician and as somebody who is clearly out of her element. But I said before that Chicago is going to be a battleground city. Mayor Brandon Johnson himself, while he is testifying before Congress, is going to be a one-term mayor, in my opinion. There's no way he's going to recover or either that gain enough votes to be part of a second attempt for a coalition. The man is done for. And to anyone that is hoping that what AOC was giving as advice would be helpful, don't use it. And this is, again, the problem that a lot of these activists, especially way back during Trump's first term when people wanted Chicago to be a sanctuary city, myself and my colleague Daniel asked these people, is there a plan? Do you have a plan? Are we 100% certain that making Chicago a sanctuary city would be an effective plan, or will it be a disaster? And yet our response was given much hate. We were told to be quiet, that we didn't know what we were talking about. And now we are seeing all these fake glorified parades again. If you didn't have a plan, why'd you do it? Was it nothing for feel-good points? Did the Democrats and a lot of these activists really think that Trump was not going to come back after the 2020 election? And I think at this point, they really foolishly enough believe their own propaganda. I wonder if we could thank USAID for promoting all of this BS. Probably so. There's going to be a document revealed. Probably sooner or later. It will happen.